Judge Judy was one of the most popular reality TV shows on the television, and spawned many of merchandise items to be sold to the lovable judge who fought for justice and rights among normal working men and women. So, Activision decided to create a video game for PC, Xbox 360, and PS3 to help boost their loss on CODs because the main guy at Activision knew that due to the survey, people were willing to play Judge Judy in HD. Not many people know this, as the game was not released due to unexplained and possibly haunting surroundings in the making of the game. A friend of mine, let's call him Victor, worked at Activision and was on the head coders for a new Judge Judy game called Judge Judy, Standing Strongly in the Name of the Law. The working title was also Firm Grip of Law on the Jude. The game was 1 year in the making, and coders were not well. Some were ill, and some got fat for no unexplained reason. It's rumored that one coder also did the suicide on his wife. He was later fired from Activision because of that. The game was then cancelled because the coders were really scared to work on the game, and felt paranoid that the game was haunted, due to them dreaming Judge Judy visiting them at night and yelling at them. Some went to hospital soon after. I talked to my friend to give me the bootleg of the unfinished game, and he said I could have it, but to beware of the possibility of the ghosts that might be in the game. I was scared, but ready for ghosts. He gave me a file entitled judgescar.exe, which was really intriguing. How can this look on my PC? Is it a third-person court game? A first-person shooter? A platformed? I was ready, but disturbed because the title was weird. I double-clicked the icon and was ready for what is to come. An activation logo came on, and soon followed by a bloodstain on the T. Gunshots were heard, and I was nervous. You could also hear a somewhat faint demonic laugh in T background. The title screen came, and I had 3 options. New game, options, death. I tried clicking on new game, but it just replayed the Activision logo, but this time without blood on the T. I tried this 3 times to see that it was busted. I clicked options and got just the choice of ticking see blood in game in realistic texture. I couldn't untick it once I was done. At this point, I got really nervous. I clicked the 3rd thing, called death, and the game seemed to begin. I was ready, but nervous. It started in the court. I was Judge Judy, and in front of me were 2 people to be persecuted with spectators in the background. Everything looked really, really realistic, and it was almost as I was watching an actual Judge Judy episode. But then, it started. A black man in an officer suit handed me an M16. I was surprised. Why do I need an M16? But then, out of nowhere, everybody had red eyes and started coming to me. They wanted Judge Judy dead, but I was not ready. I started shooting the people, but they didn't go down so fast, and everyone was screaming. A pregnant lady started shooting dead fetuses out of her mouth, and I had to block. In all that chaos, I heard panting and screams of terror from Judge Judy. It really sounded like her. Every time an embryo hit me, a scream of pain went of. This sounded too realistic. Did they get the real Judge Judy to give me the VO? I had a strange feeling killing the people in the court, but nothing prepared me for this. The last person was this Mexican man in front of me. All of a sudden, the POV changed to him, and a bloody text came, "Finish the beach." I was handed an AK-47, and I could see that the mod was from COD series. Judge Judy changed into a dragon, and fire was everywhere, and blood also. I got really scared and started shooting, but there were no bullets, only beans. But this didn't matter, because Judge Judy was screaming in pain. After a couple of shots, the judge was dead. A text came on screen, but it was 8-bit, and it said, "The Genesis has just began. You are now the law," in bloody colors. The game ended, and it ended similar to Wolfenstein 3D with the Mexican jumping in air. I immediately called my friend to ask him about the horror in the game. He didn't pick up, and just texted, "We tortured her for the screams you are about to hear." I went to sleep and thought about the game, but my computer suddenly turned on and laughed demonically, and I could hear Judge Judy cries. I still do hear them to this day, and my friend is nowhere to be seen. Rumor has it that Activision killed him because he gave me the game. So you're with your honey and you're making out when the phone riggins. You answer it and the voice is, "What are you doing with my daughter?" You tell the girl, and she say, "My dad is dead." Then who was phone? In the late 1990s, a malicious file began appearing in many people's email accounts. They would receive the email with the subject being Los Angeles, the sender being a series of quotation marks, and the date sent being September 10th, 1990. The actual text of the email was what seemed like random numbers. Most people regarded it as spam and deleted it. However, once they deleted it, they would soon after receive the email again. The more frequently deleted, the more frequently it would appear in the recipient's inbox. It seemed as if the email was begging to be read all the way through, pleading, moaning. At some point, for many people, they would grow angry at the constant email. Even blocking the sender could not stop this email from getting through. Some people chose to respond to the email, but they only received the same scrambled numbers back. Some chose to create a new email, but even that would not prevent them from receiving it. Finally, a very few, growing tired of the constant barrage of the email, actually sat down and read every number, from the first to the last, trying to figure out what was really going on here. It was more than just spam now. It was something important, something serious. An uncountable amount of time was spent trying to decipher the meaning behind these numbers, but for the unlucky people who chose to attempt it, they only failed. Interestingly, anyone who tried never gave up. They continued to pursue this deciphering, whatever the cost. It wasn't until a year later that strange effects started to appear in those who had been reverently studying the code. Sudden outbursts of rage was the main symptom, these explosions usually occurring soon after completely reading the code fully. Other times they would lay on the floor and spin around, but just as quickly stand back up. The final effect of reading the code, however, was always the same. Rage. Uncontrollable rage. These people would soon attack anyone who came near them, attempting to reach into their mouths and pull out their throats from the inside. Many people died. The sudden bursts of murders caused from this malicious code finally caught the government's eye, and on May 20th, 1996, they finally managed to cease this email from being sent to any other addresses. This was not the end of the malicious code, however. The government was interested. A list of numbers that could drive a man mad was something that held great potential. Giving this code to their experts, who had signed away their lives knowing the risk, they waited for the results of how it worked, and its meaning. To their surprise, they quickly received an answer. The code was not just random numbers. It was a program which could play an audio file. They quickly put this program together in functionality, and they played the audio it held. What they heard was revolutionary. It was beyond what they ever expected to hear. It drove them all mad. Pressing play, the words followed, in a familiar, horrible voice. Now this is the story all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down. One night, a bride go to visit her husband. "Husband?" "Yes, my dear." "Will we be married forever?" until death do us apart. The irony didn't catch the girl at the time, but soon it would. Very soon. That night they got married. The wedding had everyone in the town there, even the girl's parents and the husband's parents. The party went on until the wee hours of the night, when everyone decided it was time to home. It was a good wedding, say the husband's parents. The bridge and husband go to their ceremony in Hawaii, but when they get there, the husband changed. He started getting violence. "No, don't hit me," say the girl. So she pushed the husband out a window, and he did. His hook hand that he got in the war fell off and stabbed him in the back. Later, the girl goes home after finishing enjoy her honeymoon. She goes to tell her husband's parents the bad news. "I'm afraid I killed your husband," says the bridge. The parents look concerned for their husband's death. "I hope you can forgive me," say the bridge. "No, it's not that, my dear." And the parents hand a strange look in their eye. You see, Tim, the husband's name, died when he was 3. You were at the wedding all by yourself. The girl was so shocked she told the parents to pull car over, but then they heard a scratching sound. All the police found was a scratched car, a small stain of blood, and a hook-hand car in the car door hook. One day I went to GameStop to get a game, so I was looking through the PS3 games because that was my favorite console at the time, and I found this game called Scratch. It looked like your typical shooter, so when I got home I put it in my PS3 and decided to play. The title screen popped up with a cheery, upbeat song, so I started playing. It took me to a map screen. I took a look around the map, then I found a key. I found a door, so I tried to use the key on that door. It took me to a level called Level 1-1. When I got to the level, everything seemed calm at first, so I just kept walking right, until I met this pit. A box appeared that said, "Jump." So I did. I landed softly. From that point on, the game got messed up. The character didn't have arms. Everything was a depressing shade of black, and finally, it flashed pictures of men. Their dead, lifeless bodies almost made me want to hurl, so I turned it off and went to sleep. The next morning, I seen my screen turn on by itself, so I decided to check out what was causing my TV to turn itself on. Then my PS3 turned itself on, and suddenly I heard breathing behind me. It was one of the soldiers from the game. He knocked me out with his gun. I fell unconscious. Hours later, I woke up. I was tied to a chair and was handed a controller. The game I was forced to play was Scratch. I had no choice. I started playing, and that's where stuff got even more disturbing. The sky was dark, with blood dripping from the trees. I took a closer look, and something fell out of the tree. A dead man like the one I saw earlier, but this time was tied up with multiple scars and his stomach ripped out. I wanted to stop playing, but I was tied up, so again I really had no choice. Then lightning strikes the player's character, then it fades to black. It fades back after about 30 seconds. This time it was a man with glowing red eyes, and text saying, "Game over," with evil laughter to accompany it. Afterwards, I was taken out of this chamber and outside where I was beat down. Luckily the police spotted the assault, or else I wouldn't be here today to tell this tale. Be grateful for the life you live. Don't take it for granted. There once was a house upon that hill, the one that's thick with rot. There once was a man who lived in that house, who wasted his days in thought. There was a problem he couldn't solve, no matter how hard he tried. He planned on solving that one conundrum, if it took him until he died. He didn't eat, he hardly slept. His house was stacked with books and notes. All he talked about was that problem, and it was the subject of all he wrote. until one day it came to him, like a light bulb being lit. So tremendous the power of this revelation that he was sucked right into it. Him, his house, and all his books, consumed by his forbidden thought. So happy was he that he had the answer, he hardly even fought. Years later, a new home was built, although it never could be sold, for the man still lived there, though in another dimension, wanting the world to be told that he'd figured it out, so he'd leave clues for those who went in alone. He'd fog up mirrors or write on the walls, and he'd say, "I know who was phone." My name is Jack. I'm 23 years old. This is my Yeti encounter. I was on a trip to Mount Everest for 1 month with my friend Francisco. We had both of our cameras so we could film the mountain. When we stepped on the snowy ground on the mountain, we had the strange feeling that something was watching us from afar. We shook it off and kept setting up our stuff. It was 10:26 and I was tired, so I told Francisco I was going to sleep. He replied, "Okay, I'll go on setting up the equipment." After that, I fell on the soft sheet of my sleeping bag. The next morning, I awakened to a scream, like an ape of some sort. It was so ear-piercing. Francisco and I turned to the source of the sound to see a large thing, 7 feet tall to be exact, and we stared at him as he walked away with a white coat all over. Then my friend Francisco asked me if it was the Yeti. I replied, "No, the Yeti's not." I was interrupted by another scream. This time the thing was running towards us. We screamed and ran. We had no time to pick up our equipment. We found a nearby cave and ran straight in it before it caught up to us. It was a dark and smelly cave. I pulled out my lighter and lit up the cave, to be frightened so hard I just stood there not screaming. Bodies of humans, half-eating, torn-off flesh and bones sticking out. So bloody I vomited. Then Francisco reminded me about the thing that was chasing us. "Dude, Jack, what if that thing comes in here?" "It won't, I promise." "Okay, let's get the hell out of here." We ran out of the cave. Later we finally reached a nearby airport. The people that worked there only spoke German. Francisco had been taught German in high school. After we told them what had happened, they laughed and said they would take us home for $240. I will never forget the sighting of that thing. This is the story of a day where there was all this blood. A man was walking around, and blood started coming out of him everywhere. There was so much blood that it filled up an elevator. He went to the store, and there was just blood all over the place. People were slipping in it, and they were all grossed out. He tried to go swimming, and all the sharks went nuts and bit into everybody. He got chased by all the vampires ever. One time, the blood got a kid and a dog. At the end of the day, everyone decided they would send him to space so that he would stop getting blood everywhere. The scariest part is that the man was you, or he was a lady if you were a lady, and you forgot that this happened. What the scariest thing you can imagine? Ghosts? Skeletons? Well, this Sotri is scarier than those things. One day, a man was on his computer looking at horror stories. Their door was behind him. Suddenly, a big Demians pops out, and a door opens by itself. The man is spooked, but he knows it's just his imagining. He locoses the door and sits back at his computer. Then the door opens again. The man is annoyed. "Get the heck out of here, you dumb demon!" he yells. Demons is angry. Next day, man notices all his socks have gone missing. "Curse you, demons!" he yells. He's annoyed, and calls the police, but they act like he is crazy, so man calls the paranormal investigators. Next day, they's how up playing the Ghostbusters song and get ready to capture the Demions, but the demons prepares to be man's wife. "I don't have a wife. Get the heck out of her!" But the Ghostbusters leave, thinking he is a pranker. Man is annoyed, so he decides to talk ill the demo himself. He goes to punch the Demion, but the angry demon possessed the man. Man is fight to the death, but demon is too strong. Still to this day, we do not know what happened to man. One night, I was playing Pokemon, and things were all normal except Ash kept looking at me, and it made me scared. So I checked the time, and it was 11:59 at night. I was scared because midnight is scary, and I read a lot of scary Pokemon stories, but I kept playing. But then I checked the clock on the game, and it said 666 o'clock, which really scared me because minutes don't go higher than 60 on clocks, even in Japan games. Then I looked at my Pokemon, and all of them had blood on their teeth, which really scared me, so I turned off the game, but it stayed on, so I was really worried by now. And then Ash came out of the screen and stabbed me and said, "Anybody who plays Pokemon must die because the game was made by a psychopathic man who only made the game to kill little American kids because he was still angry about the bombs they put there in one of the wars." After that, every character on the screen died, and I haven't played Pokemon since, even though I really liked it before this time I played it. The end. In the cereal market, there's two companies, Kellogg's and General Mills. I love them both, not just for their cereals, but their commercials. Have you heard of Cinnamon and Bad Apple? If you don't, it's basically a carefree cinnamon stick with a Jamaican accent and an accident-prone apple who raced to the bowl of Apple Jacks. In 2007, the production for the ads stopped, and no more commercials were being produced for the ad campaign. That was a lie. They were actually working on another commercial. The production number was 709G. The title was Silence. The commercial Stuck was later given Silence's production number to hide the latter's existence. How do I know this, you ask? Well, I was an intern at the agency that did the cinnamon and apple commercials. One day in 2007, I walked into the studio and saw everybody looking afraid. This wasn't like them when they finished commercials. They would usually be happy and cheerful. The voice actor for Cinnamon walked in. In his hand was a CD labeled 709G Silence. He dropped the CD onto the floor and left. I picked up the CD, which had dust from the floor's dirtiness. 709G was a production number. I really thought we weren't even making commercials for CNA anymore. The day was over, and I decided to go home for the night. I also snuck out with the disc. It was hard, but I did. When I got home, I went to my mini movie theater and inserted the disc into the DVD player. I wondered what craziness Cinnamon and Apple would get into. I was thinking it would be something Halloween-themed, because it started with a picture of the air date of the commercial, which was October 4th, 2007. It started with Cinnamon, though something was up. His eyes were white and were bloodshot. He was walking a long road. It didn't seem to go anywhere. He was also mumbling something about Robin Williams and Boston bombings. At the time, no one knew of the Boston bombings or Robin Williams' death. Cinnamon just kept walking, the same as you and I would do. Cinnamon stopped in front of a skateboard. He looked at it for a couple of seconds before riding it. It continued to show him skateboarding. The red apple was nowhere to be seen. Silence, 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 a voice said. It sounded like a rough voice. It repeated silence 3 times. Cinnamon stopped and stared at the camera. Those bloodshot eyes were now dripping with blood, that was oozing out. Silence, silence, silence. The voice returned. It repeated the word silence again in a low-pitched voice. Cinnamon spoke. Silence, silence, silence. Cinnamon said it like the rough voice, although it sounded high-pitched. I told you to silence, silence, silence. Cinnamon started to melt. He turned into a pile of goop. That voice returned again. That's right. Death sentence for Cinnamon. And then, Happy Halloween. It ended there. The next day, I walked into the studio. A group of angry-looking people stand in front of me. They asked me why I took the disc. I said that I was sorry and gave them the disc. The next day, I heard Cinnamon's voice actor committed suicide. I was invited to the funeral. I decided to peek into the coffin, and what I saw was shocking. Scrawled into the coffin's top was, "Now we're silenced." In any city, in any country, you can walk into the nearest McDonald's and order 5-star cuisine at absolutely sensational prices. Really, it's not a bad gig. But more importantly, something tragic happened to me at a McDonald's 5 years ago that changed my life for the worse, and left my jaw shattered in several places. It all started when I was sitting down at a table and enjoying a Big Mac to myself, because I had no friends. My father was just mad about McDonald's, and used to dress up like Ronald McDonald because it turned my mother on, but he left us for the late-night cashier at the local Mickey D's when I was just a wee little lad. I was playing my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Fall of the Foot Clan on my Nintendo Game Boy, when suddenly I heard a knock on the door. "Come in," I shouted, as if I owned the McDonald's. I didn't, but more importantly, I was terrified tortellini by what I saw when I looked up from my gray and green-scale dot matrix screen. It was Big Bird. At first I thought it was a guy in a suit, but no. It was him in the flesh. I mean feathers. I ran up to him and hugged his legs, and asked him what he was doing so far away from Sesame Street. "Birdseed milkshake," he replied, in a depressed and monotonous voice after sighing. I asked him why he didn't just go to Mr. Hooper's store, and he told me that ever since Mr. Hooper died, and he learned about death, he felt that he no longer belonged on Sesame Street, and was in need of new friends. I told him he could be my friend, and then I shrieked in horror when I realized that no good deed does go unpunished after all. Big Bird opened his naughty yellow beak, and inside there was nothing but jagged, razor-like teeth, with blood, guts, gore, sinew, tartar sauce, and calculus splattered all over them. Upon closer inspection, I wailed like a banshee again. Those weren't just razor-like teeth. They were razors. "Takes one to know one," Big Bird muttered as he waddled over to the counter like a penguin with fetal alcohol syndrome. I learned that term from a Fresh Prince of Bel-Air episode I watched years ago. As scared as I was, and uncertain if I should call 911 or the Pest Control Society or the local dog catcher if he also caught anthropomorphic aviaries, my eyes were fixed on Big Bird himself. Would he also be ordering a Big Mac? What about chicken McNuggets? If he ordered those, wouldn't that make him a cannibal? Then again, he was a yellow songbird, or a canary if I recall correctly. Did you know that miners send canaries into mines to potentially die to check if it's poisonous down there? They certainly didn't have any birdseed milkshakes. "Hi, how may I help you?" The orange-haired, pochmarked teenage boy behind the register asked the monstrous creature who once taught me about the alphabet and how to share with strangers of any color, football team, and sexual identity. "Birdseed milkshake." It turned out that Big Bird, in his fallen state, had still remembered that it was sinful to lie. Good. "We don't have any of those here, sir," the $5.15 an hour employee responded with. "Could I get you something else?" It was then that I literally lost my crap. because Big Bird got really pissed off and wrapped his feathery fingers or webs or whatever you call them for birds around the scholarly gentleman's throat. I was sitting close enough that even though Big Bird was whispering menacingly, I could still make out what he said. He leaned into the boy's face, and I threw up my Arch Deluxe. I ordered 2 burgers that day because I used to be fat. "Amogus," the bird whispered slowly. He proceeded to pull his feathery, winged bird hand into a pocket. I guess birds have pockets, or at least anthropomorphic canary men do, and pulled out 2 AA batteries. The young man, clearly watching his life flash before his youthful virgin eyes, let out an answer. "SCP-x2xKevin." Big Bird let him go so that he could speak proper English. "We used to have a console here, but we got rid of it very recently, sir." Yes, McDonald's used to host video game consoles, such as the Nintendo GameCube, so that you could play Super Mario Sunshine while taunting the other children because the fast food restaurant GameCube was now your GameCube, and they'd always be from poor parents who sent them to public school because they didn't truly love them. Big Bird turned around as the high school dropout customer service representative caught his breath and stuttered off to the fry cook area, dazed and confused. I know for a fact he smokes pot during his lunch breaks. I vomited up at least a couple and a half French fries after what happened next happened. Big Bird's eyes had turned pitch black. His entire body had become pixelated like a distorted electronic nightmare, and the rest of the restaurant turned black. It was me sitting at an invisible table, Big Bird standing right near me and staring into my soul like a rabid dog eyeing his next-door neighbor's leg as mutton, and I could still see my Game Boy for some reason. In the blink of an instant, Big Bird ran up to me in supersonic, superhuman speeds and ripped my Game Boy straight out of my hands. I cried, but Big Bird didn't give a crap. Big Bird plopped 2 AA batteries into my Game Boy. This was after he ripped open the back cover of my Game Boy and stuck my 2 AA batteries up his nose. "See? I'm a walrus now," Big Bird said, in his usual Big Bird voice, as the room slowly faded back into the way it was before. I figured everything was all right now, given that Big Bird was happily rotating between the A and B buttons in the control pad, and playing what I assumed was TMNT Fall of the Foot Clan on my Nintendo Game Boy. It was the shock of my life when he handed me back my portable gaming console 15 minutes later, and I checked the cartridge label on the back. Amogus. My jaw unhinged. I rolled around on the floor in spastic motions, arms and legs flailing, as the paramedics arrived, put me on a stretcher, and hauled me off into the ambulance. One of them stole my Game Boy.